Hello everyone. So welcome back to our discussion about plant tissues. In earlier lectures, we were discussing about the simple permanent plant tissues, and today our topic of discussion is complex permanent plant tissues. So as you know, complex permanent plant tissues are the tissues that contain various types of cells, but all these cells, they combine together to perform a specific function. So complex permanent tissues are, you can say, these are the group of number of dead or living cells combined together to perform a specific function. So such type of tissues are known as complex permanent tissues, and as you know, in plants there are two types of complex permanent tissues, and these two types of complex permanent tissues are xylem and phloem. So if we compare xylem and phloem, as you know, their function is to transport various materials from one part of the plant to another. So xylem and phloem together are known as conducting tissues or vascular bundles, as they carry various materials from one part of the plant to another. If you compare the process of conduction through xylem and phloem, there are few differences between them. If you talk about xylem, it conducts only water and mineral from roots to other parts, that is xylem. And if you look at phloem, what it conducts photosynthesized food. From leaves to other parts. So first major difference between xylem and phloem is that xylem conducts water and mineral absorbed by roots, and it carries it to various parts of the plants, and the function of phloem is to transport the photosynthesized food from leaves and other green parts of the plant to the various parts of the plant where it is required. Another important thing here is the conduction in xylem is unidirectional, means this movement is always from roots to upper parts, means you can say this movement is always from bottom to top. That's why this conduction is known as unidirectional, whereas this conduction is known as, in phloem, the conduction of phloem is multi-directional, because depending upon the requirement of the plant, the photosynthesized food may move from top to bottom, from bottom to top, or even sidewise. So this kind of movement in phloem is known as multidirectional movement. And another difference is the conduction in xylem, it does not use energy. It is a simple physical process which occurs on its own. But the conduction in phloem, it involves energy, in the form of ATP, right? So these are the basic differences between the conduction of material in xylem and phloem. So now one by one, let's have a look at the different components of xylem and phloem. As they are the complex tissue, so obviously they are having number of components. So now let us find out what are these components present in xylem and phloem. So here first of all we discuss the components of xylem. In xylem there are 4 components. The first one is traccheides, and these traccheides are dead elongated cells having lignified cell walls and a broad lumen, or you can say a broad cell cavity, and having tapered ends. So that is how the traccheides are. So as I told you, traccheides are the long cells having tapered ends. Tapered means flattened ends. And the cell walls are thick due to deposition of lignin. And in this cell wall, there are some pits present, right? Although it is having deposition of lignin, still the cavity is broad, or you can say the lumen is broad and having internal pits. So that is how the xylem traccheides look. And if you look at the function of traccheides, their function is conduction of water and minerals, and they also provide mechanical support to the plant. That is about traccheides. Another type of component of the xylem are vessels. And if you look at the vessels, these are also, you can say, long dead cells with lignified walls, but end walls have dissolved, so that they result in formation of a continuous long tubular structure. So if you look at the vessels are the long cells. So imagine if the walls joining these two traccheides, if that vanishes, if it dissolves, then it results in formation of a long continuous conducting channel, and that long continuous conducting channel is known as vessel. These are the main tubular structure that are responsible for transport of water and minerals. So here we can see the vessels. So if you look at the function, they are the main conducting cells. Right? So these are the component of the xylem that are known as vessels. Another component of xylem is xylem fibers. These cells are also long, dead, having lignified walls, pointed at ends, and are basically sclerenchyma. So these xylem fibers are sclerenchyma. That's why these are also known as sclerenchymatous tissue, or also known as wood fibers. And their function is to provide mechanical support to the plant. So if you look at the fibers, these kind of cells, fibers look like long pointed ends and having deposition of lignin, having thick walls, purely supportive in nature, provides mechanical support, and have got again pits in them. And you can see they are having the pointed ends, and these are the fibers, right? And the last component of the xylem is, that is xylem parenchyma. It is the only living component. So they are living cells having thin walls, prominent nucleus, and dense cytoplasm. So if you look at the structure of parenchyma, the parenchymal cells are like this. They are the purely living cells, and their main function is they are having thin walls and a well developed nucleus and a dense cytoplasm, right? So that is the structure of xylem parenchyma, the only living cells, and their function is it helps in food storage, and of course it helps in conduction. So these all are the four types of xylem cells or xylem components. The first one is xylem traccheides. These are dead elongated cells having lignified cell walls and broad lumen and tapered ends, and their function is conduction of water and minerals. If you look at the another component, that is vessels. Vessels are long dead cells with lignified walls, but still their lumen are broad. Their function is again they mainly help in conduction of water and minerals. Third type of cells are fibers, dead cells, lignified walls again, and pointed at the ends. They are purely sclerenchyma, also known as sclerenchymatous tissue or wood fibers, and their function is purely supportive. They provide mechanical support to the plant. And the last type of cells or components of xylem are xylem parenchyma, the only living component of the cell of the xylem, and thin walls, prominent nucleus, and their function is mainly to store food, and also it helps in conduction of material. So that was about the one type of complex permanent tissue, that is xylem. Another complex permanent tissue which you can observe in plants is the phloem. And like xylem, phloem also have 4 components, but the only difference is in xylem the 3 components were living, the 3 components were dead and 1 was living, but in phloem the 3 components are living and 1 is dead, right? So now we compare about the various components of phloem. In phloem, the 4 components, the first one is again sieve tubes. So if you look at the sieve tubes, these are living, elongated, thin-walled cells having pores on end walls, and due to presence of pores on their end walls, they are known as sieves or sieve tubes. So their function is purely conduction of material, conduction of photosynthesized food from one cell to another. So if you look at the structure of sieve tubes, these are long thin-walled cells having pores in their end walls, and due to presence of pores, these tubes are known as what? Sieve tubes. Attached to these sieve tubes, there is another component of xylem, that is the companion cell. As the name shows, companion means who gives company or who supports in some function. So these companion cells, as they provide help to the sieve tubes for transport of material, that's why these are known as companion cells. They are long thin-walled cells having the well-developed nucleus, so second component of phloem is companion cells. These are also living, thin-walled, having developed nucleus. And their function is to help sieve tubes in conduction. Right? So that is about companion cells. And the third type of cells which you can found here are parenchyma. Again, these are living, elongated, having thin walls, dense cytoplasm and active nucleus. and their function is to store food. So main function of Xylem, Phloem Parenchyma is to store food, so that as you have seen that they are having a transport system which requires energy, and as it requires energy, for that food is required, and that food is stored in Xylem, Phloem Parenchyma. And so you can see the Phloem Parenchyma cells are like this. Long thin walled cells having a big vacuole, a dense cytoplasm, and a well developed nucleus, right? And the last type of component of phloem is phloem fibers, the only dead component of the cell of the phloem. Only dead cells having again lignified walls. If you look at the function, of course their function is to provide mechanical support, and some of the fibers which we use in our daily life for making for textile purposes are basically the phloem fibers. For example, you can take the case of a hemp, flax and jute fibers. They all are the examples of phloem fibers, right? So these are the four components of phloem. Sieve tubes having perforated walls, living cells, these are the living elongated cells having thin cell walls and having pores on the end walls, and because the presence of pores, that's why these are known as sieve tubes, and they are basic important component in conduction of material. Another type of cells here are companion cells that remain associated with the sieve tubes, and their main function is to help or support the sieve tubes in conduction of material. Long thin walled cells having a single developed nucleus, and parenchyma, third component, again the living component having elongated thin walled cells, and they are having dense cytoplasm and a very well developed nucleus, and their function is basically to store food so that it can provide energy for to the phloem for performing all its activities. And the last type of component of phloem is phloem fibers. That is the only dead component of phloem, and these fibers, they are having highly lignified walls, thick walls, dead cells, and their function is providing mechanical support to the plant, and they remain associated with the other components. And the common example of these phloem fibers which we use in our everyday life is the hemp or jute fibers or the flax fibers which we use for making textile purposes, right? So that is all about the plant tissues, and from next lecture we will be start a discussion about the animal tissues. Have a nice time. Goodbye till then.